Great to have you back on the original Bama Tailgate Show as we get you ready for Alabama and Middle Tennessee with our good buddy David Paschell. I can speak, I think, but it's great to see you, my friend, with the Chattanooga Times Free Press and on the radio every day in the scenic city.
Yeah, good to see you, Mick. It's been a while. Don't see you quite nearly as much as I used to. That's for sure.
No, we need to change that, man. Got to have you come on the show a little bit more and hang out with us. But let's get right into it. You know, this is an exciting time of year. You cover, the SEC, including Alabama. The Crimson Tide and Middle Tennessee will go right into that matchup. Last year, Middle Tennessee beat Miami. Now, they're a 39-point underdog, and they lost a core of, the players that made that happen. But historically, this has been a team that can give other teams and big programs fits.
Yeah, and you've obviously spent time in Tennessee. Tennessee's got a unique dynamic, and it's coincidental today because the two kingpins of the SEC, Alabama and Georgia, they're both playing teams from Tennessee. And with Middle Tennessee, you've got a head coach that's been there in Rick Stockstill. This is his 18th year. So he's been at Middle Tennessee 1 year longer than Nick Saban's been at Alabama. I mean, we all talk about Saban's longevity, but Rick Stockstill has been at Middle Tennessee for 18 years. And then Jason Simpson at UT Martin, they're playing Georgia tonight. He's entering his 18th year at UT Martin. So it's really unique to have a dynamic in Tennessee of these two coaches, one at the FBS level, one at the FCS level, who have been at their programs for so long. But yeah, Rick Stockstill's 109 and 103. It's really a testament to just kind of riding out the storm. There have been some difficult years under Stockstill, but as you mentioned, last year they get Miami early, a Miami defense that was coordinated by Kevin Steele.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sure Kevin will be motivated for that. That was a 45-31 game. And if you remember the highlights that night, because it was kind of the game of college football that day, they were hitting big play after big play. But yeah, this is a team that won its last 4 games, won the Hawaii Bowl. And I think Nick Saban all week has been, preaching this is a quality, opponent. This is not your typical, there are far worse teams that have appeared on Alabama's schedule over the years.
What do you think about this Alabama program where it is right now? They haven't won a national championship since 2020, and that feels like for Alabama an eternity. Georgia's won back-to-back. Alabama trying to figure out who's going to be the quarterback. I think Jalen Milroe will start, but Tyler Buchner definitely pushing for that job. Your thoughts on where Alabama is right now?
Well, they're still way, way up there, and there are two very different ways to look at it. I mean, what's the thing you've heard the most about Alabama this offseason? Well, they were 11-2, and their 2 losses were on the last play of the game. What concerns me more from the Alabama standpoint is just their number of close victories. You mentioned 2020, and I think it's unfortunate that because it was in COVID, I think that was one of the best teams that college football's ever seen. I mean, if you go back to that 2020 Bama year, they demolished everybody. I mean, Florida made it a 1-possession game late in the SEC championship, but, Florida had Trask and Pitts and Tony. I mean, that was a talented team. But what Alabama did to Notre Dame and Ohio State in the playoffs, they were doing that to everybody all year. You had LSU in 2019 that was just so good offensively, and a lot of people look back at LSU as one of the great teams ever. I just think COVID hurts Alabama in 20 because I think that's one of the greatest championship teams ever. But if you go, since that time, the one thing about Alabama that scares me the most, especially last year, you got those 2 last play losses, but you had 3 very fortunate wins. I mean, a very fortunate win over Texas. You had Texas A&M throwing for the end zone on the last play, and you had Ole Miss over there that was a real close call. So when you think about 5 close games that Alabama had, we were just talking about the COVID year. They didn't have any really. I know Florida got the ball late, down 6 or whatever, but they had the whole field to go. Having 5 close games, that's very UnSaban like. And I know it's one of those things that the bottom line is winning the game. And if you remember years back when Saban had that 14-13 win over Arkansas on the road, and if you remember his post game, he really jumped on people saying, we can't win every game by, such and such. We've got to appreciate these wins. And so, I think Alabama's close calls last year are a little bit concerning. I don't know if that was an aberration or if that's the start of maybe this is a, still a great program, but, one that may be a notch below Georgia as they've been the last couple of years.
Great to have David Paschell on the original Bama Tailgate Show. And I want to remind you guys that our look around the SEC is brought to you by Tuscaloosa Hyundai. Great time to go take a look at fantastic cars as we get ready for Alabama and Middle Tennessee State, 6:30 tonight. All right, let's switch gears a little bit, David. Let's talk Georgia. Back-to-back championships. They play one of the weakest schedules in college football. That'll change next year. Your thoughts, though, on this Georgia program and where they are this year?
Well, you touched on their schedule, and it is weak, but it's one of those things where it's not their fault that it's weak. I mean, it's not, the SEC made them drop the Oklahoma game because Oklahoma's coming into the league. Mm-hmm. And when you think about their two longtime rivals within the league, Auburn and Florida, those two programs are in spin cycles right now. Both of those programs are coming off losing seasons. So, it is a weak looking schedule, but again, it's not Georgia's fault that Florida and Auburn, have been struggling. But no, it's a unique team in that I'm curious about their running back situation. Branson Robinson got hurt and he's out for the year. You've got Dejon Edwards and Kendall Milton. One's dealing with an MCL, one's dealing with a hamstring. I know it's not going to make a difference tonight against UT Martin, but I do think with a new quarterback in Carson Beck, you do want to have a really good running game. They have not had a 1,000-yard rusher since DeAndre Swift about 4 years ago, but it hadn't really mattered. I mean, they've been a by-committee backfield that's still been very impressive, but you want to have as many healthy veterans as you can. So keeping Edwards and keeping Milton healthy, to me, is the biggest storyline for Georgia if they're going to make that three-peat. I think Carson Beck will be fine. I think that offensive line is fantastic. I think that's because I covered a lot of Georgia during the Mark Richt era, and I think that's the biggest thing Kirby's done from Richt. I mean, if you go back to those Georgia lines under Richt, they may have a player or two that played in the NFL, but then they have some 3-star from up the road in Jefferson that always just dreamed of playing for the Dogs. Now it is just NFL across the board with 5 stars up front. And I think Georgia, they've got the best, a generational tight end in Brock Bowers. And I think they've really helped. Georgia hadn't needed the transfer portal, but they do go out and get Dominic Lovett from Missouri and Ra Thomas from Mississippi State to go with Ladd McConkey. And so I think their receivers will be better this year as well. So I like that defense. A lot of people really close to that program say that this could be the most talented young nucleus that Georgia's had, which is amazing. I mean, they've had 25 draft picks in the last 2 years. So a lot of people think this may be the most talented team they've got. They're just real young.
Hanging out with David Paschell, the Bama Football Tailgate Show, rocking here, getting you ready for Alabama and Middle Tennessee State. It's hard to believe that kickoff is right around the corner, and we hope that you guys are having a great Saturday. All right, I got to ask you this. SEC team to watch. Last year, LSU beat Alabama. They got blown out in the SEC title game, but they were the SEC West champs. You don't have to say them, but who are the teams that you would say my teams to watch this year in the SEC?
Well, I think Texas A&M kind of makes that easy because it's inexcusable for them ever to go 5-7. And so I just think, bringing in Bobby Petrino, they did sign that number 1 class in 2022. Some of the guys have left, but most of them have stayed. They're another year older. I mean, that should be a much improved offensive line. Devin Achane is a big loss for them because he was a really exciting guy to watch out of the backfield. I just think that's kind of your natural pick just because they've got, if you ask the most improved, I mean, like I said, they won 5 games last year, which is inexcusable. So I don't think anybody would be shocked if Texas A&M bounced back up to that 9-3 or even 10-2 type of range just because of how much talent they have. But I mean, I do like I do like LSU. I think Brian Kelly has done a great job of getting them really good, really quick. He was so good for so many years at Notre Dame, and you think about the tradition at Notre Dame, but you also think about that's a school in Northern Indiana. I don't think that's a school that's quite as easy to recruit to as it was was back in the Holtz days and before that. So, but no, I would say Texas A&M would be your team to kind of watch as far as biggest jump from last season, because I think in the East it's pretty wide open there. I think you got Georgia's your number one, Tennessee's a pretty clear number two after going 11-2 and winning the Orange Bowl. Then you've kind of got that grab bag. I mean, can South Carolina sustain it? I mean, because, credit to Shane Beamer, he's been proving doubters wrong from the get-go, and they had a huge November last year, knocking Tennessee and Clemson out of the college playoff picture. But 8-5, I mean, can they maintain that? Kentucky backslid from 10-3 to 7-6. Can they? They've made some acquisitions, getting Devin Leary, who was the ACC preseason player of the year at NC State last year before he got hurt. They've added to an offensive line that was just woeful last year. I mean, that's why Will Levis struggled so much last year compared to the year before. You've got Florida. I mean, Florida should never be, in the spin cycle they've been on. And then you've got Missouri, which is just kind of this wild card out there too. I mean, that is just your definition of a 500 program. I mean, they were that way late under Barry Odom. They've been that way under Drinkwitz. Can they finally snap out of it? So I'm curious to see what happens in the East behind Georgia and Tennessee, because they look like a pretty clear one too.
Great stuff. David, how can people read your work? How can they listen to you on the radio? How can they follow you?
It is D Paschell, and that's Paschall, D Paschell at timesfreepress.com. We're on ESPN Chattanooga as far as Press Row. That's our show from 3 to 6 Eastern, 2 to 5 Central each day. And so, those are the best ways to get in touch.
All right, great stuff. David Paschell joining us on the Bama Tailgate Show. We're going to talk Alabama football. We'll get you ready for the game. All that stuff coming up. Thanks for hanging out. More right after this.